Oh, let me go back. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Joe Preon, and I am the 2022 president of Smart Coast California. We're here tonight to have a sea level rise summit. Some of you may have been at our first summit that we had in Long Beach earlier this year, and because of that, what came out of it was the desire and a lot of people asking for virtual summits that were more close to the communities where the issues have been being raised. So we're here for that tonight. This slide is a view of our board, our current board for 2022. We actually just had our nomination close the end of July for our new board members that will be coming on, and we'll be going through those this year. Our board is going to be reduced down to 11. We felt that there wasn't the need to have as large of a board as we have had. So this next year, 2023, we'll have a board of 11. Our board is, you'll see by the map, our board is made up from a variety of realtors at this point in time that are from the southern tip of California, going up to Marin with Katie Beacock. You'll also see that the two directors that are a part of Santa Cruz are here tonight too. I saw them, Rosemary and Valerie. Thank you guys very much for being here. Our desire is to try to pick up board members in the far northern counties to get more representation up at that end of the state. We all know that we have an 1,100-mile coastline, and we really want to make sure that we have representation up and down the state. The other goal that we have this year is to bring on board members that aren't necessarily realtors, that are able to tap into all aspects of all things coastal. As I was talking to you earlier, this is a picture of our board members along with our California Association of Realtors 2022 president, Otto Katrina. This was taken shortly after our very successful summit at the Westin Hotel in Long Beach. We had great feedback from a variety of people that were there, elected officials. We had an amazing group of panelists that spoke throughout the day. We had our local coastal commissioner who encouraged collaboration between the Coastal Commission and Smart Coast California. So all of those things were just a very big success in our very first ever in-person policy summit. For those of you that were not able to be there, look for it again next year, bigger and better. And I promise it'll be bigger and better. Our program outline tonight, you'll see our guest speakers that we have. And we're very excited to have everybody here tonight and share. We'll go through each of the speakers, and then at the end, we will have a question and answer session. Please be aware that as the speakers are speaking, if you've got questions, put them in the chat or keep them in the chat and not unmute yourself to interrupt the speakers. We'll do all questions at the end. That way we can give each of the speakers a chance to get through their presentation without interruption. And I'd really appreciate your help on this. And if that does become a problem, I will be kind of reminding you gently that we need to let the speakers get through each of their sessions. So thank you for working with me on that one. And that does end my presentation. Now, I would like to introduce Manu Koenig. He is the 1st District County Supervisor, and he's here to talk about the coastal plans on the local level. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank your organization for the great summit that you organized down in Long Beach earlier this year. It was really a pleasure to attend that and to have an opportunity to meet so many other folks from coastal communities, other elected leaders, and just engage community members, and really get a sense that we're working through these issues together as a state. And you know, a lot of the work has been happening just at the county level, but it's good to get a broader view of how we're all connected. Should I go ahead and I'll share the presentation from my computer then, I'm seeing.
That'd be great.
Okay. You all see that?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So this is the presentation that I had an opportunity to share down at the summit in Long Beach, and happy to share with you tonight. And it'll just give you a good overview of our proposed local coastal plan, and really zero in on one specific element of that, which is the seawall protection exception area. So for those of you who don't know, my district, the first district, is right in the middle of the county, and it includes pretty much everything from the harbor over through to Pleasure Point and down Opal Cliffs Drive to the edge of Capitola. And so my favorite place to supervise is always in the water there at the surf break there at Pleasure Point. And I think one of the most exciting parts of my campaign, and when I was elected supervisor in 2020, I was getting to sail around Pleasure Point using a large campaign sign as a sail and this inflatable raft. So the Santa Cruz County Local Coastal Program and the Public Safety Element Amendment is something that took about 3 years of work. As a county, we started the work in 2018 and went through the end of 2020. And that was the most intense period of work, but really a lot of the thinking and planning began as early as 2011 as far as what kind of amendments we were going to propose for that. We spent just an estimated $225,000 to $500,000 largely in terms of staff time preparing the local coastal plan. And that largely is thanks to David Carlson, who's on the line tonight and will be presenting after me. And just considering his time and all the time that also went in from our planning director at the time, Kathy Malloy, and all the time that it took to have public meetings about this. We had 13 public meetings in total, 4 just informational public meetings, 6 planning commission hearings, and 3 board of supervisors hearings. The board reviewed and ultimately passed the safety element update on September 15th, 2020. So this was actually right before I took office. And it has been sitting with the Coastal Commission ever since for them to review. It did include a policy establishing a shoreline protection exception area, and that would be locations designated to be protected for the long term in a manner that reduces impacts on coastal resources, such as by replacement of riprap and disparate materials with a new modern vertical seawall with integrated public access. And that is really based on our experience with the East Cliff Drive Parkway project. And I'll show some pictures to explain that a little bit more here. So this is the area that we proposed for a seawall protection exception area. It's about 1.5 miles along the Santa Cruz shoreline, starting at SoCal Point, also known as Pleasure Point, and going down to through Opal Cliffs right to the edge of the city of Capitola there, where their jurisdiction takes effect. And really we proposed this based on the success of the East Cliff Drive Parkway project. For those of you who have been in the county for a while, you know that East Cliff had a lot of issues before we undertook the seawall and public access project. There were significant cliff failures, particularly in 1994, that restricted traffic and led ultimately to a federal study that looked deeply into how to stabilize East Cliff. And it did recommend a stabilization project, which we undertook. And you can see also in this old picture, the riprap that was put in along the base of the cliff to try to stabilize it at the time, and some of the erosion that happened at the road. And this is what it looks like today, as I'm sure many of you know and enjoy regularly. You can see we removed all of that riprap and other concrete, and put in a very naturalistic seawall here, right? I mean, this seawall is curved, it's got a lot of crevices, and the goal with that is to mimic the kind of wall that would be created by nature. And it also has benefits of preventing the surf from hitting it head on, and it really helps to deflect pressure points, and is much better in the long term. And of course, this project not only has been great in terms of stabilizing the cliff and protecting the infrastructure that's under the road. I mean, there's the road itself, but of course, the sewer line and water lines that are under the road, and electricity above, but it's been fantastic for public access. We also tried to put in, where possible, sort of the high watermark goat path, if you will, so people could still access the water at high tide. And I mean, I think East Cliff today is probably one of the most visited parts of the first district in the county, and that we could definitely say this project has been an overwhelming success. If anything, the issues we see with it today are just issues caused by too much success. A lot of people in the water having to deal with the permitting for surf schools, and most recently issues with unpermitted vendors coming out to this area to try to take advantage of all the foot traffic. So that East Cliff Drive Parkway and Bluff Protection Project covers from Pleasure Point roughly to Opal Cliffs. So that's the project you're familiar with today. It added 4 new public access points there. And what we included in our local coastal plan proposal was to create an Opal Cliffs Geologic Hazard Assessment District, or the great acronym GHAD. And this essentially is an assessment district that would be paid for by private property owners, but would allow them to make a collective investment in essentially extending that seawall project to include this area. And we also really looked at this from a geological point of view. The cliffs along this point here are quite different than what you would find closer to the harbor. They're in terms of their height, and the amount of mineral content in there. So that's why we thought it was appropriate, not only because it's right next to the East Cliff Drive Parkway project, but also just because of the way it naturally is formed now. And if we look at the area around Opal Cliff today, you can see it looks in many ways similar to the way East Cliff looked before we undertook the project. It's hard to walk the entire length of the shoreline because of the riprap and concrete blocks that are there. So if the Geologic Hazard Assessment District was formed and modern seawalls were put in here, this riprap would come out. This is kind of one of those older style seawalls that's flat, that really has proved not so great for erosion, because the waves will hit that straight on and splash up on the cliff and then sort of suck sand out. So not the same as those more nuanced cliff faces that we see in the more modern project. And then this, of course, is privates, which is no longer private, now officially part of county parks and managed by county parks. Of course, it's seen a ton of usage since it was open to the public. We're really excited about that. But we also want to be able to manage it successfully into the future. The Geologic Hazard Assessment District for Opal Cliffs would add possibly as many as 2 more public access points. There is another stairwell, just very much like privates, just a little bit to the north, which could be repaired and returned to public access. And then there's a potential for even an additional public access point along this area. Of course, we've got the value of the homes in this area are worth considering as well, not only for the private property owners, but in terms of the tax base that provides to the county. There's 42 properties here in total, ranging it in value from $2.77 million to $8 million. We estimate that the sandstone in this area is eroding at 6 inches to 12 inches per year, and that that could mean as many as 8 homes will be destroyed in the next 20 years and 24 homes in the next 25 years. So that's would obviously be a significant impact to the county's tax base. And of course, once the homes go, that means that once again, the street is threatened, similar to the way it was on East Cliff Drive, including the water, sewer, and electrical that is under Opal Cliffs Drive. So the estimated cost of a seawall, if pursued individually by each one of these homeowners, is about $1.2 to $1.5 million per parcel. Whereas if they pursue it as a single project with the Geological Hazard Assessment District, it could bring the cost down to $800,000 per parcel or less. So it's really a win from the private property owner's perspective in terms of the collective action, reduces the cost by as much as half. So the reason the county felt comfortable supporting this proposed seawall protection exception area was it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the public, which would get 2 or even 3 new public access points, improved walkability on the beach, including removing that riprap that still makes it hard to walk the full length of the coastline, as well as providing a high tide pathway. And then for private property owners, the seawall construction costs would be reduced by 50% by working together. And for local government, it ensures that our utilities are safeguarded, as well as the property tax base that helps to pay for the maintenance of those utilities. So on February 11th, 2022, the Coastal Commission did approve the our local coastal plan amendment, but without the safety element and coastal hazard section, which includes the protection area exception area that I've been talking about. And it also included there's this definition of existing development that was not included in what they approved, which is existing structures included but not limited to structures that existed prior to implementation of the Coastal Act in 1978. So for those of you who are not familiar, that this is sort of a big piece of the debate between county governments like ours and the Coastal Commission is what the definition of an existing structure is in terms of, and then how much you're allowed to maintain those existing structures. So should an existing structure be considered anything up to 2020 when we proposed the amendment, or should an existing structure be only anything up to 1978 when the Coastal Act was implemented? The Coastal Commission has largely insisted that we use the definition of existing structure pegged to 1978, and many local governments like ours have asked that we move that to 2020 or whenever the amendment was submitted. As I said, the shoreline protection exception area is not part of the approval. The Coastal Commission must act on the safety element within 2 years of our submission of it. So the deadline is quickly approaching October 21st of this year. We have gotten some interesting comments back from Coastal Commission staff on our submission, which are not surprising, but still show that we have a ways to go to get to agreement. One positive development has been that Ventura County's local coastal plan amendment was approved by the Coastal Commission back in April, and they did include a definition of existing development that said a legally established structure development established before the effective date of the Coastal Act in conformity with all applicable laws in effect at the time, or development established after the effective date of the Coastal Act and authorized by an effective coastal development permit or other required local coastal program approval. So that is some movement in the right direction from the Coastal Commission in terms of defining existing development as up to and including more recently authorized and permitted developments. That's really all I've got for you to share. In summary, the shoreline protection exception areas and geological hazard assessment districts could be effective tools to implement community-wide adaptation options for existing development that really has nowhere to retreat. And Pleasure Point and the Opal Cliffs area is certainly at the center of our urban core and infrastructure. And if already some of the seawalls are protecting essential infrastructure. And, you know, if the private properties along the Opal Cliffs go, then it won't be long before we're talking about how to protect the public infrastructure under Opal Cliffs. So I think that there's a viable path forward here, but we do need timely approval by the Coastal Commission, and that is, the deadline is coming up soon. So
thank you, Supervisor Koenig. If you can hang out until the end of the presentations and answer questions for anybody, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll be able to hang out until I do have a 6:30 appointment I'm going to have to leave for.
Okay.
I'll be able to hang out till then.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker is David Carlson. He is the Santa Cruz County Resource Planner, and he's here to talk to us today about the county's LCPA update. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Joe. And thank you, Supervisor Koenig, for that presentation. I'll talk a little bit more about the project as a whole and get into maybe a little bit more detail on other aspects of the project, as well as talk a little bit about that exception area. So I'll start by sharing my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah, we got it, Dave.
Great. Okay, so a quick outline of my presentation will include describing the setting, the countywide setting, which I'll do on this slide. And after that, I'll briefly review the recent timeline after the Board of Supervisors approved it in September 2020. Then I'll get right into the major policy considerations and where we stand on those with the Coastal Commission staff at this point. Then I'll finish up by describing a series of other policy proposals that are in the amendment package. So the setting is the coastline of the unincorporated parts of Santa Cruz County. This includes the urbanized coastal areas of Live Oak, Pleasure Point, and Opal Cliffs in the mid-county area in between the cities of Santa Cruz and Capitola, and additional urbanized coastal areas south of the city of Capitola and extending down to the seascape area. Most of the coastal development in these areas is located on coastal bluffs, but there's also a significant amount of development at beach level. These unincorporated county areas are located within what is called the Urban Services Line, or USL. Further south of Seascape, there are also several small communities consisting of clusters of homes on small lots with urban type services. And these areas are surrounded by what's called the Rural Services Line, or RSL. And I mentioned that because you'll see those terms referred to later. These areas are marked by the green outlines. And then outside of the Urban Services Line and Rural Services Line areas is the rest of the rural areas of the North Coast and the South County, consisting primarily of large commercial agricultural parcels. About half of the urbanized areas of the county's unincorporated coastline has some form of shoreline protection or coastal armoring. That commonly includes riprap revetments and concrete and wood retaining walls, placed there in the past, mostly under regular permits or emergency permits, and in some cases without permits. As Supervisor Koenig indicated, the Board of Supervisors approved the general plan public safety element and LCP amendments related to coastal hazards in September of 2020. They were submitted to the Coastal Commission Central Coast Office in October 2020. After some back and forth between staffs, the submittal was deemed complete in June of 2021. Then in October 2021, the county agreed to an extension of time for the commission to act, as mentioned, to October 2022. And then also it's been mentioned, some of you may have noticed, the commission took action to approve part of our amendments in February 2022. But this didn't include the amendments related to coastal hazards, which were separated out in order to act on separately. So we're currently looking at that October 2022 deadline for the Coastal Commission to take action on our amendments. So the way LCP the process goes ideally is the local agency and the Coastal Commission staff agree on the amendment language, and the LCP amendments are approved by the Coastal Commission without modification. However, in some cases, for various reasons, it proves more difficult to reach agreement on the amendments prior to submittal of the locally approved amendments to the Commission staff. So this is our situation now, and Commission staff is proposing modifications to our proposed LCP amendments that they feel are necessary for the Coastal Commission to find them consistent with the Coastal Act and the Commission's sea level rise document. In this slide and the next one, I'll review some the major policy issues and compare the county's proposal to the suggested modifications. The county's proposal on these major issues is essentially to maintain existing policies that have been in place for decades in the county. So we think they remain consistent with the Coastal Act. But we're also proposing a series of policies that do address the issue of sea level rise, and I'll describe those later after these couple of slides. So this one covers the definition of existing development. And the reason it's important is that under the Coastal Act, only existing development may qualify for shoreline protection or coastal armory to protect it from coastal erosion threats. The county has always defined existing development as whatever was legally existing on the property when an application is submitted. And we've issued many permits for new coastal armoring to protect existing development and permits to maintain existing coastal armoring based on this understanding. However, the Coastal Commission's position, as expressed in their policy guidance document and through the staff, is that an existing structure is limited to a structure that was in existence on the date of that the Coastal Act went into effect and has not been redeveloped since that time. The definition of redevelopment then becomes crucial here and means basically 50% structural alteration of any single major component of the structure cumulatively since January 1st, 1977. So in other words, a redeveloped structure is not an existing structure and is not entitled to any form of shoreline protection or coastal armoring, whether the armoring is existing or proposed. So another big policy difference involves the process for determining how far a structure must be set back from the top of a coastal bluff or the shoreline. The county has always had a threshold of development that would determine if the project needed to meet a coastal bluff setback. If the scope of the project does not rise to that threshold, a geologic setback calculation is not required. If the scope of the project exceeds that threshold, the geologic setback calculation is required and the structure must meet the setback. And the setback is the distance necessary for the structure to be safe from coastal erosion processes for a 75-year period of time. The county's threshold is shown on the left, on the left column there, and involves calculating the percentage of the whole structure being modified or expanded. The idea is larger projects must meet the setback, but smaller projects that don't expand in a seaward direction don't. The county has always allowed the geologic setback evaluation to consider the effects of any existing shoreline, legal existing shoreline protection structure in determining where the 75-year erosion rate line should be located. And oftentimes the geologist will determine that if the existing protection structure is maintained adequately, there will be little to no erosion for the next 75 years, and the structure can be set back at the 25-foot minimum setback line. On the other hand, the Coastal Commission position is that all development, however minor, is as defined in the Coastal Act, must meet the geologic coastal bluff setback. And furthermore, the geologic setback calculation may not consider the effects of any existing or proposed shoreline protection. The major implication of this is not only that more projects become subject to a requirement to meet the coastal bluff setback, but the setback line on properties that have existing shoreline protection moves further back when you don't consider that existing protection in the 75-year erosion rate calculation. So obviously this has the effect of significantly reducing the future buildable area on a coastal bluff property. So those are the two big policy differences. And now I'll go into some of our proposals that we think can sort of try to bridge this gap that we have. So we recognize that we have these differences in an approach and on existing development and which structures are entitled to shoreline protection and how the bluff setback is calculated. And so our approach was to offer a suite of additional policies to demonstrate a commitment to mitigating the effects of existing shoreline protection, continuing to require structures to be adequately set back from the coastal bluff, and putting property owners on notice about future implications of sea level rise and coastal erosion on their property. We called this a hybrid approach, trying to bridge this gap between some of the stricter policies favored by the commission and their sea level rise guidance and the county's historic methodology for regulating development on the coast. Our proposal includes requirements to reevaluate existing shoreline protection structures as part of a large remodel or reconstruction project and improve those existing shoreline protection structures to reduce their impacts on coastal resources. A simple example of this would be restacking the rock in an existing riprap revetment to remove rocks that might have migrated and created further beach encroachment. There are policies to calculate and collect mitigation fees based on the impacts of the existing shoreline protection, and those fees would be used locally to improve coastal access. And there are policies to attach a set of conditions on permits that would require property owners to accept the risks and assume liability related to building on an eroding coastline. There's also a set of policy that address different requirements or restrictions by geographic area. You've heard about this shoreline protection exception area that essentially would allow shoreline armoring along the Opal Cliffs bluffs as long as it includes improvements to coastal resources, such as improvements to public access to the coast and along the coast. For areas outside of the SPIA, but still within the urban services line and rural services line, there would be limitations on future development in that prior to 2040, one major project would be allowed under the county's existing methodology for calculating the geologic setback. So just prior to 2040, we would commit to revisiting this policy approach and deciding whether to continue it or alter the approach. For these areas where future development would be limited prior to 2040, there's also a policy that contemplates the creation of shoreline management plans that would provide the opportunity for the community to plan alternative scenarios for restricting or allowing future development and protection of coastal resources and development along the coast. The county is proposing a policy prohibiting new shoreline protection structures on the beach. This would apply to the type of shoreline protection structures that protect houses that are actually at beach level, not the type of shoreline protection that would be at the base of a coastal bluff, preventing coastal bluff erosion. And then in rural areas of the county outside the urban services line and rural services line, the proposed policy would prohibit any new shoreline protection. And again, most of those properties are generally large commercial agricultural properties that are not developed with structures on the coastal bluff or on the beach. And then finally, there's that policy that establishes the 2040 timeline for this update and the effective duration of these policies. And again, prior to that date, the idea is that we would revisit all of these policies and update them in light of the conditions with respect to coastal hazards and sea level rise as they're understood at that time. And that concludes my presentation. I will stop screen sharing.
Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate it. Next up is Dr. David Revell, and Dr. Revell is here to give us some solutions. Dr. Revell, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good
There you
evening,
are.
everyone. Let me, hang on, I think hopefully everybody can see the presentation now.
Yes.
Yep, loud and clear.
Great. Okay. So I thank you for letting me join this dialogue. I think it's a really important one. I'm a coastal geomorphologist. I've been working with just about every coastal jurisdiction on the California coast. I'm a principal at Integral Consulting, but have played many roles over my career. I really want to talk about some solutions and what we kind of need to consider. First of all, adaptation is really challenging. Every adaptation strategy we can consider has secondary consequences. The current approach is often piecemeal, one parcel at a time, and implemented in an emergency when something fails or breaks or floods. The solutions really need a regional perspective or a neighborhood perspective, often that have a lack of regional authority. There's limited dollars for adaptation planning and implementation. And the community vision, and I think this is a big piece in this discussion, is that the community vision and public trust resources are often not considered when we think about what to do in an emergency. I think we need a holistic consideration of our coastal resources and community identity. And really, ultimately, we need to figure out, when are we going to change from one adaptation strategy to the next? Manage retreat is a bad sort of word and has a lot of bad connotations, but I think over time, it's really the only solution. And so how do we go from a protect what we have now, while we buy time to figure out what we're going to do over a longer period of time? The ocean will rise for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we can't just pick a fight with the ocean. So what do we need to consider to do this effectively and equitably? We have to consider the developed landscape. What's the private and public infrastructure and development? What's the recreational uses of viewing the coast, going to the beach, playing in the intertidal on a skimboard, subtidal, surfing? What is the ecosystem services? What's the value of being able to see an orca or a sea otter or a marine mammal? What happens when the water quality is really poor and we can't get in the ocean and we have red tides? What happens to the mental health benefits of people just walking along the ocean shore? And all that can be included in an economic assessment. What are the costs of doing something? What are the costs of not doing something? How much is it going to cost over time? And how does those changes, if we do something or don't do something, affect tax revenues for the county, property values, other things? I want to back up a little and just sort of give a little bit of, I'm a geomorphologist, so I speak for the beaches, but a little bit of sort of natural sediment transport, because whatever we decide to do needs to work with the natural system and not against it. So natural sediment is transport, sand, is driven by waves predominantly in this area, and they mainly from the northwest and west, occasionally from the south. The northwest waves move sand from outside Morro Bay along the coast, northern Santa Cruz coastline, along natural bridges in the city, past Steamer Lane and Cowles to the harbor, where it is dredged and bypassed. And then it continues on down past Pleasure Point to the state beaches, Manresa, Rio Del Mar, all the way down to the Monterey Submarine Canyon. So this natural sediment transport is sort of the waves from the north and west move the sand really quickly this direction, particularly along Pleasure Point. When we get south swells, it moves the sand up onto the beaches. So if we can start to use those, then we don't have to pay as much. I led a consulting team looking at adaptation planning for the city of Santa Cruz with a variety of technical experts and other consulting firms. And I want to give just a few quick highlights. I know this is about the county, but there's some lessons to be shared, and we do share the same sediment transport pathways. So we need to work together. The first step was we looked at all the areas of erosion concern. This included sea caves that go well beyond the midpoint of West Cliff Drive today. A failure on one of those would require us to go to one lane or no lane of traffic. So we need to get ahead of these. We ranked them in a high, medium, low, and what kind of failures, the condition of existing armoring. We've had one failure out at Auburn where they're now have half the road closed to rebuild that. But there's a lot of different life expectancies of the riprap and the different types of shore protection structures that are in place now. So jumping ahead to adaptation, we looked at we looked at 4 different adaptations. Business as usual, which is respond in an emergency and dump rock revetments. And I would just call them riprap because they're not really engineered when they're just a big rock dump. And so they're not very stable and they tend to fall apart pretty quickly. Very expensive. A coastal recreational focused one, a protection focused one, and then a managed retreat focused one. We ran sort of a lot of physical and economic linked models to look at what of these strategies show the highest probability of success and cost the least over time. And it showed that the recreational focused actions, the ones that kept the surf and recreation, along with the recreational trail along West Cliff, which is very similar to the East Cliff condition, showed the highest benefit to the community and probability of success. The business as usual, hold the line, armoring under emergency, cost the most in the long term. When we looked at both managed retreat and protection focused, they were both better if it was undertaken before sea level rise got to about 9 inches. To me, when I translate this, and this is already distilled down from a lot of spreadsheets and modeling work, the key decision we have as a community is to decide whether we're going to invest in the short term and buy some properties, acquire some land, do some things that are going to cost a lot up front, but maybe save us a lot of money over time, or are we going to pay to fill all the potholes and repair an emergency and pay a lot more in the long term? Those are really challenging questions that places are facing all over. So I'm going to introduce this concept of an adaptation pathway. I think the answer is that we're going to do everything over time. We're going to enjoy the coast as much as we can, the way it is now, for as long as we can, until it no longer makes some sense to do something different. And so, the concept here is to we have protection, let's protect, let's maybe maintain revetments and eventually replace them with soil nail walls. So we remove the footprint of those structures on the beach, as Supervisor Koenig sort of demonstrated on the East Cliff project. This costs a lot of money, but the beach and surf impacts over time will eventually decrease as waves interact more and more with the structure, but we wouldn't have to narrow the road and the life would be a medium term. We're going to maybe accommodate, maybe we start a sand management program or look at retention structures to widen the beaches like Capitola does, where the only reason they have a beach at all is because of their small groins that are down there or small jetties. And then we can look at how do we phase into retreat, increasing development setbacks from a right of way or the cliff edge, moving the recreational trail, going to one-way traffic. All of these are options. And then when do we start to relocate infrastructure and reroute traffic? These are all going to have to be determined, and they're all going to take a lot of time to plan, finance, and implement and permit. So we need to sort of identify when things are starting to happen so that we have time to plan and then implement to accommodate sea level rise or out to some distance time horizon. So let me give you some concrete examples of what we've sort of proposed in along West Cliff, and then I'll get into some other solutions elsewhere in the county. This along the top, I have time. You could substitute any number of triggers that we're going to that we can monitor. We can look at the tide gauge at sea level rise elevations. We can pick the times, 2040. We could do by exposure. How frequently does waves overtop and you have to clean up East Cliff Drive or West Cliff Drive at Woodrow? What's the distance between the recreational trail and a cliff edge? If a structure is damaged by greater than 50% or has multiple damage claims, maybe that's another indicator. It can also be just by cost. Once the city or the county spends, $1 billion, we probably should be thinking to invest that in something longer term than staying in the same place. So the first sort of thing that came out of the West Cliff Drive project was a public works plan. This is a clear plan that the city has come up with that is in front of the Coastal Commission that is basically 10 years. That will include transportation enhancement, a maintenance program for coastal armoring, looking at a sand management feasibility study, and then making access improvements, stormwater drainage to slow erosion, some habitat and landscaping, and then really expanding education and inclusiveness and looking at financing mechanisms. So that's moving through the process right now. The maintaining armoring is looking at the short lifespan structures that we've identified, cleaning up these fugitive rocks. These are the ones that have fallen out of the structure and are taking up and interrupting our recreational use of the beach. They're a nuisance. And so by implementing a maintenance program, you preempt emergency repairs and reduce the cost of maintaining those over time. The sand management feasibility study, I'm going to just skip the words, but it basically is a feasibility study to look at costs, sand volumes, permitting, and engineering. And it would work something like this. We would dredge sand from the harbor and back pass it, maybe up to Pyramid Beach or Mitchell's Cove or its beach or Cowles, but basically put it back in the system farther up coast. Then as waves and natural sand transport comes, all of those little tiny pocket beaches along the west side be filled back in with sand, and we maintain the recreation and enhance some of the surfing, but particularly at Cowles and Steamer Lane. Now, this is an estimated to be about 10% of what we annually dredge on the other side, and well within what is already trapped by the harbor at Seabright and Main Beach. So this sand would not be lost, it would just be recycled.
Dr. Revell, we're running out of time.
Okay,
so
I'll pick it up. So there is a potential county transport where we can look at changing the timing and location of dredge placements to take some of those natural transport pathways out much better. And we can look at living shoreline approaches. This is native vegetation at Seabright and at West Cliff that is helping to reduce erosion. This is a project in Rio Del Mar, which has been quite successful so far. Creek meanders, erodes the, threatening the Rio Del Mar bathroom. We came in with some drift logs in the middle of one of the atmospheric rain events, and basically engineered a log jam shore protection structure. So we excavated out, cross braced, and built this structure with these high logs, basically the design elevation. An 8-year-old kid walking along the sidewalk here could still see the ocean. We did this along a shape that the creek often takes when it meanders back, and then we covered it in sand. And this is now, we're waiting to see what happens when the storms come.
Sorry to have to cut you short, Dr. Revell. Thank you for what you're able to present. All right. Up next is Donna. Wait, Donna, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself because I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Okay, if Dave Revell could take down the screen, I'll share mine. Okay. I am not Dr. David Revell. Are you folks seeing my my screen?
We're seeing your screen and we're seeing your photo. He was
Did you
just
say-
the last in the photo.
Okay, so you should be seeing the Smart Coast California policies. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your attendance. My name is Don Schmitz. I'm a 35-year coastal consultant, and very proud to be representing Smart Coast California. And we're going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what our policies are and what work we are doing with local jurisdictions. So the board of directors for Smart Coast California has adopted 5 policies as they pertain to managed retreat, existing development, regulatory takings, and rolling easements, which are kind of mashed together here, and a tiered response to sea level rise. So managed retreat, let's talk about this for a second. The practice of managed retreat is actually a good one in certain areas. In other areas, it's not so good. And what it means essentially is when you build a new structure or you rebuild a new structure, pull it back far enough so that it will never need a shoreline protection device. So Mother Nature can do her thing, which will work very well in the northern part of Santa Cruz County, where it's very agrarian and rural. There's lots of room for the shoreline to move inland. However, I disagree that managed retreat is inevitable. There's no debate that certain areas like the industrial ports in California will not be retreating anywhere. Should sea level rise manifest to the degrees that some are predicting, then they will build more robust breakwaters and bulkheads. And the board on Smoke Coast, California supports managed retreat in rural areas, but do not believe that that should be applied to areas with these iconic communities where they've got no place to retreat to. And we are strongly advocating that alternatives to managed retreat be implemented in those areas with those iconic communities, such as dune restoration, living shorelines, kelp forestation, beach sand nourishment. Artificial reefs show tremendous promise and have been successfully implemented in different places around the world, where they break the back of the waves before they erode the bluffs and beaches. And in a worst case scenario, if nothing else is happening for these critical areas, just as the County of Santa Cruz is proposing, revetments and breakwaters and seawalls should be an option available to those communities. The second policy that has been adopted by the board of directors pertains to that of existing development. And this is obviously a hot topic. We will expand on that a little bit here in the time that we have for this presentation. But the Coastal Commission and some jurisdictions have tried to rewind the clock back to 1977 for the definition of existing development. It's not constituted in law. The only litigation that's occurred in this was Surfrider versus Coastal Commission, where ironically the Coastal Commission argued that the definition of existing means existing. And the reason why this is, and the courts ruled in favor of the Coastal Commission as opposed to Surfrider for that 1977 definition. And the reason this is so hugely important is because you have literally decades of people with homes and businesses that have valid coastal development permits that could be X'd out from their legal rights to have a shoreline protection device under the Coastal Act unless they were in existence before 1977. The County of Santa Cruz does have a favorable definition of existing development. It says existing structures, including but not limited to structures that existed prior to the implementation of the Coastal Act. You saw the definition in Ventura, which is a good one. And we applauded that. We thought was a nice compromise by the Coastal Commission, which reflected what imposed in the County of Santa Cruz's definition. The City of Santa Cruz currently is proposing, for purposes of their policies, existing principal structures means shoreline structures that were legally authorized prior to January 1st, 1977. We respectfully disagree with that and hope that the City of Santa Cruz will revisit that and go back to just the definition of existing. The board has also voted on policies that pertains to regulatory takings. Should a local jurisdiction enact regulations which results in the destruction of private property, they're entitled to fair market compensation that should be implemented at the time of that taking. This is reflected in the Fifth Amendment of the Federal Constitution. It's reflected in Article 1, Section 1 of the California Constitution, which specifies that private property owners have an inalienable right to protect their property. We would point out that the County of Santa Cruz has some favorable language. It doesn't speak too much towards compensation, but it says that if the regulations will result in a taking, they may allow some form of development that provides for the minimum economic use necessary to avoid an unconstitutional taking of private property without just compensation. So that's an inherent nod to the fact that the County of Santa Cruz is recognizing that private property rights are an important part of the equation. The city of Morro Bay had very favorable language. They successfully obtained certification of their local coastal program, and they wrote that should the city implement policies that result in the destruction of private property, the city should pay fair market value for the land which they are taking by regulation. I just got a note handed to me that the sound quality is poor. Don't know what to do about that, folks. Perhaps if everybody could mute that's logged on, and maybe we'll pick up a little bit of bandwidth. We'll just make the best with what we've got on it here. So the city of Morro Bay does have very favorable language in regards to that. The issue of rolling easements is one that is really coming to the fore, and this is essentially where regulatory agencies are considering that with managed retreat, the mean high tide line will move in over a period of time. And there's a big debate now in regards to the public trust doctrine and whether or not that private property then becomes public property. The position of the board of Smart Coast California is that if rolling easements are instituted with just inherent triggers, that the property owner should be compensated for that land which was taken. And this is not a esoteric theoretical discussion. The Coastal Commission conditioned a home end of last year, a new home, specifying that they could never have a shoreline protection device, and that they would have every 5 years a mean high tide line survey. And should that mean high tide line be shown to move up even for a period of time up underneath that structure, then they would have to remove the house or that part of the house, or obtain a some sort of lease from the State Lands Commission. So this is something that is a very important consideration for local communities. This is the aforementioned document that the Coastal Commission is working on, draft guiding principles and actions for the public trust doctrine. Smart Coast California submitted a comment letter on this, as did a number of land use attorneys. This is one to watch very closely. Tiered response is something else which the board of Smart Coast California has adopted. Just in plain English, we have all these different projections on sea level rise over a period of decades. Let's monitor it. Let's see what's actually going to happen. And then when certain levels of sea level manifest, should they manifest, then new regulations should come into effect. One of the things that has concerned us is that the tiered response approach of the California Coastal Commission has been, well, if we get a certain amount of sea level rise, we'll just have managed retreat. And we at Smart Coast California don't think in every case that is something that should be appropriate. There's a lot of different options that could be part of that tiered response, including living shorelines, beach nourishment, artificial reefs, living submerged breakwaters, groins, and as is proposed by the County of Santa Cruz, community seawall. We want to commend both the city and county for their tiered response. I'm not going to go over all the details here in the interest of time, but both the city of Santa Cruz and the county of Santa Cruz do have incorporated into their local coastal programs a tiered response approach. The city of Santa Cruz's LCP amendment was published in November of 2021. It received comments from the Coastal Commission, and from what we understand, the Coastal Commission feels that perhaps it's too detailed, and we know that the city of Santa Cruz is working on their response on revisions to the local coastal program, and many of the city's policies, and Smart Coast California stands ready to assist the city. Hold on, maybe this will help. To assist the city as they continue to have their discussions and negotiations with the Coastal Commission. The County of Santa Cruz has a deadline pursuant to statutes of October 21st, 2022. That is right around the corner. It's already been described that this is the LCP safety element, coastal shoreline. It's the most critical component as it pertains to shoreline protection and sea level rise. We will continue to monitor this closely at Smart Coast California, and what those suggested modifications may or may not be that come from the California Coastal Commission. There's just 2 hearings left. There's the September hearing. We were just in attendance at the August hearing. And then of course, the absolute deadline would be the hearing in October And after that, they would run out of their statutory timelines. The shoreline protection exception areas is really truly revolutionary. Supervisor did a great job in describing that, as did our planner. And this is the Bluff Armory that would be funded by Geologic Hazard Abatement Districts, funded by the property owners. We think that this is a really good precedent for other communities that just have no place to go. In other places, of course, managed retreat works, but it just does not work for this particular community. It's important to note that the negotiations and discussions between the local jurisdictions and the Coastal Commission, everybody has to agree. The Coastal Act is written that way. The County Board of Supervisors or the City Council must agree to any suggested modifications. It's hard to imagine a county which is more environmentally sensitive and has a lengthy history than the County of Santa Barbara. Nonetheless, after many years of work, right before their hearing, they withdrew their local coastal program amendment from consideration at the Coastal Commission. They just read the suggested modifications from the Coastal Commission staff, found them completely to be unacceptable, and they withdrew it. Now they're still having conversations with the coastal staff, and the executive director is committed to working with them and reported that to the commission. The sticking points with the County of Santa Barbara was that all-important definition of existing development, and plus the fact that even though the County of Santa Barbara utilized the extreme risk aversion levels of sea level rise, purportedly the coastal staff wanted them to go to a level of sea level rise, which was even higher. So we urge you, who are members of the communities up there in Santa Cruz or the city of Santa Cruz, to monitor this closely and to be part of the conversation. Now, the meeting agendas for the Coastal Commission are published online. This is a snapshot of a meeting agenda for July of this year. You log on, you will see it. You have a map over here on the right-hand side where you can see the city of Capitola, the city of Santa Cruz, and these other large areas is Santa Cruz County. You click onto the agenda, you will see the agenda items. This is the example we're showing you here, which was for San Luis Obispo County's local coastal program amendment. This was from the Central Coast District. Santa Cruz is in the North Central Coast District. And then the links to the staff reports will be located right there. You can click on them. You will see the staff report pulled up. You can read it yourself for exactly what those details show. So this is a bit of a call to action for the residents of the County of Santa Cruz. It's just beyond important. And look, the elected officials at the local level, they're doing their very best to try and represent their constituents. And never is everybody completely happy about this, but they're very sensitive to whether or not they've got the support of the community. And also the Coastal Commission responds to folks who care enough to take time out of their day and testify. It's excellent if you can write a letter of support for your county and the proposed local coastal program amendment. It's better yet if you can log on and testify at the hearing, express yourself. The Coastal Act actually emphasizes that public participation is to be maximized in these sorts of things. So you can see below here where we have where you can submit written comments. If you're going to speak, you need to submit your speaker's request by 5 p.m. the day before. So again, we urge you very much. You have a lot at stake here as residents of Santa Cruz County, and that's how you get involved with this. So to connect up with us, these are how you find us both on our website and to sign up. We are a statewide organization. We're very involved. We field a lot of questions. We assist local communities. and that includes you, the citizens that live within that community. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. That concludes my presentation, and Marta and Joe will be facilitating the Q&A.
Thank you, Don. Perhaps to get through this, if there's, now I don't hear the feedback, so maybe, no, there it is. Maybe if you can mute yourself, Don, and I think we have most of the questions answered that were in the chat. If there are any other questions that anybody has, I know that Supervisor Koenig and Dr. Revell both had to go on to other engagements. So if you've got questions of us or of Dawn or
I think
David
there was
Carlson?
one in, Joe, I think there's one in the chat for Dave Carlson. Is he still online, Dave?
He is here.
Okay, great. So I don't know if you saw it in the chat, but it said at last Friday's Coastal Commission workshop, the Coastal Commission clearly indicated that their response to the cities and counties backing away from their LCPs would be to switch to an incremental approach and to sign off on the 90% they and the counties agreed to and continue working on the contentious issues. I'd be curious to know if Dave Carlson has heard about that from the folks he's working with at the Coastal Commission.
Yes, I have. And I heard it last Friday as well. It doesn't really solve our problem though, because we're currently, as every other jurisdiction is, continuing to process coastal development permits for projects. And these issues come up on each one. So we have to solve this problem, or we're just continue to be in this untenable situation where we process the permit according to our local policies and practices, and then it gets to the Coastal Commission level, either on appeal or on a threat of an appeal, and then different standards kick in, and that's been happening on projects on the ground. And so taking the incremental approach doesn't really help us out. I mean, sure, we could get a number of policies in place, but doesn't help us out on the key issues that we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. We have, it appears that this is Drew Lanza. If Drew's still here, we appear that Rare Beach that has oh, you were talking about your the Pajaro Dunes South, and they had questions about Pajaro Dunes North, I believe.
Lars, the question is about the sea. Let me read the original question, Lars. Run. Hang on. It's basically, you know, do we have a seawall? Are we in trouble with Pajaro Dunes, Lars? You want to talk about Pajaro Dunes North?
I think the two questions kind of overlapped, and maybe Dave wants to take a stab at this one. I don't know. I'm going to leave it to the floor.
What is the question exactly?
I got it here. The question was, how does Pajaro Dunes fit into Armory or future protection plans? We've got a 2-mile seawall we're trying to maintain. Our issue with the Coastal Commission is they won't let us maintain a jihad seawall. So that's why we're here. I don't know, Lars, do you want to talk about Pajaro Dunes North and armoring and future protection plans?
Well, we're certainly interested in knowing what the rules are going to be. Right now, it's in good shape, but whether it'll last in good shape in perpetuity, we don't know.
Lars, I'd like to add something to that as well. Charlie Eady, I worked with Pajaro Dunes both north and south, and I think an important element of this is that the revetments, as Drew mentioned, both on the south and in the north, are working quite well, and that the sea level rise has not affected Pajaro Dunes. In fact, the beaches there have more sand now than they had before the development was done there in the 60s. So I think this reinforces the point that Don Schmitz and others have made, which is, you know, the Coastal Commission in their desire to be one size fits all, no armoring. 1977 is sacrosanct, etc., really precludes opportunities to look at specific areas with specific policies. And I think that's what the county in Santa Cruz has done with us. They have, we've worked with them, as have the people in Nanu's district, to come up with tailored policies. And so we're very concerned, Pajaro Dunes is very concerned that the Coastal Commission gets into these positions where they just assume that a revetment or armoring is going to cause the beach to go away, which isn't the case.
Okay, Don, I'm going to ask you to respond to the question about approving LCPs.
Yes, there was a comment in the chat that there's no need to adopt a new LCP. That might be a reflection of the fact that some jurisdictions have withdrawn their LCPs. Well, not exactly. Should counties and cities take their ball and go home and not process a local coastal program, be cognizant of the fact that every single beach and bluff top development in the state of California is within the appealable jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission. So if the county and city issues a coastal development permit for whatever, a new home, a remodeled home, a commercial project, a shoreline protection device, if the Coastal Commission takes issue with that, they can and will appeal it up to themselves. And they will try to implement managed retreat on a piecemeal basis. And it is just bad land use planning. I do believe that there is a real partnership that can be available for the Coastal Commission as an agency in these local jurisdictions. There's going to have to be compromises which gets hammered out. But that being said, not talking to them is really not an option, not only for the reason I just told you, but in summation, should the system completely break down, there is the potential that the legislature could modify the Coastal Act, which they've done once before in Malibu, and just give unfettered authority to the Coastal Commission as the state agency to write and adopt the local coastal program. So I think it really behooves the counties and the cities to maintain those dialogues and continue to work with the Coastal Commission to come up with holistic and global solutions in conjunction with their partners at the Coastal Commission.
Okay, thanks, Don. I'm gonna wrap it up here. I want to take a minute and thank all the presenters that came and shared their valuable insight and information. Your first county supervisor, district county supervisor, Manu Koning, Dave Carlson from the Santa Cruz County Resource Planning, Dr. David Revell. Sorry that we had to cut you short. And then obviously our very own Don Schmitz. Don's knowledge in both sea level rise and Coastal Commission and getting to be able to communicate with the Coastal Commission have been more than valuable to us. And also I want to just thank every one of you for your participation in this. This is our this is our first one this year. We did do a couple of these remote summits last year, but there was an overwhelming response for more of them. And so thank you to every one of you that participated, that signed up. Again, I think you saw in the chat that this recording will be on our website, a link to it on our website within 7 days. I'm assuming that the presentation slides will be there as well. Marta, head shake yes to that. Okay, yes, they will be. So you'll be able to have the complete presentation. Please let people know about what we're doing and what we're trying to facilitate here. We are trying to be a liaison. Smart Coast California is trying to be that mentor or that go-between between the Coastal Commission and those of you both in the county and in the cities that are having to deal with the Coastal Commission issues. So we're here to facilitate. All of our contact information is in our on our website. The two links that Dawn brought up on how to get a hold of us, those will be in the presentation. So those QR codes, click on those, and we're here to help in any way that we may be able to. Valerie, you have a question?
Yeah, but I think you just answered it. Basically, if anyone has a question they didn't feel was answered or they need more information, going to those two links would be the best way for them to communicate and get further solution.
Yep, thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
So with that, I think unless there are other questions of Dawn or any of the other speakers that are here, if you raise your hand, or I don't see any. All right, well, with that, we're going to close it up. Marta? No, all good? All right. Thank you all very, very much for being here. We really appreciate your time. And any questions, as Valerie said, reach out to your elected officials, reach out to us, and we'll try to get the questions answered from the speakers that need to have the answered or the questions presented to them. So thank you very much. Enjoy your evening, and we'll talk to you all soon.